Before we move on to a different application, so we were working on this multiplication app, I want to add a few challenge problems that you might consider working on your own. So one that we hinted at but did not solve together would be to add a timing feature. And in that case, I would encourage you to look around in the Python docs to get some inspiration. But what you might consider doing is setting a timer, so starting the time right before showing them the problem. So I guess here on line, well, I've just made it line 29. In your code, it's probably different. So right when you show them the problem, you might start a timer. In other words, you might get the current time. And then once they type something, you might stop the time. So immediately after you ingest their input, you might stop the time, and you could subtract those two things and figure out how long it took them. So I don't want to say too much more because I want to leave that to you. So you could add a timing feature, and then you could also add some sort of feature that keeps track of who it is. And I'm giving you two choices for that. You could ingest, and when I say ingest, I just mean get input from the user using the input function. So at the beginning of the program, you could just ask them who they are, and you could use that. And you could add that information either into this dictionary, the dictionary called problem data, or somewhere else that you see fit. And you could also, a second option would be you can rename the shelve entirely. So each time you have a new person, you could restart your app, and you could just rename the shelve so that it is, instead of saying math data, maybe it says the person's name, and then it says the word data. In particular, if you're newer to coding, I think that's a pretty good way to go. Just make a few. Maybe you have 3 users. Maybe you have 3 friends that you want to get to try this. So that's where we're going. We're going with, I'm trying to create a way that you could actually build a very small data set with no help from somebody like me. You could just do this on your own. So go then find a couple friends, have them answer 50 or 100 problems apiece. And if they say, well, I don't really like multiplying that much, you'll say, well, everybody needs to be good at multiplying, so just get a little bit of practice. They don't have to be just learning how to do it. They could be just high school students, middle school students, or they could even be adults, whatever you want. But make sure you get a couple hundred problems. Like, we want a goodly amount of data. And then once you have those things, I wrote another suggestion down here, then try to answer a question like this. And I'm giving you a suggested question to get you started. Maybe you'll come up with more on your own, but here's the one I came up with. Of the numbers being tested, which are the integers 2 through 10 inclusive, which one takes the longest on average for users to answer? So this is kind of tricky. I'm going to say a few more things about it, and then I'll let you loose. So what if we have the problem 4 times 8? And by the way, I'm not writing Python code, I'm just making notes. You might see both of these appear in your data set. I'm just jumping into a very specific data problem now. Because what we're doing, every time we generate these 2 random numbers, we're then putting them in, we're formatting them using dot format. We are causing them to become a string. And this is what we're storing inside our database. We're storing this, and it contains whatever A is and whatever B is. So if A is 8 and B is 4, it puts them as 8 times 4. If A is 4 and B is 8, it puts it as 4 times 8. And so you may have to figure out how you want your program to handle this. You may not. You could also ignore that case. But indeed, the question here is what's happening and what's causing a delay. I don't know why I put 3 times 6 there, just as another example of what a multiplication problem would look like. So are there some that take longer than others? That's kind of an interesting question. And then, you could see a math teacher might be interested in this type of thing, because then that would be some interesting feedback on just how people do. So, great. So the only purpose of this video now was to give you a few ideas of what you could do off on your own with a piece of code such as the one we wrote last time. And we're going to get started with writing some code for a very different problem next.